Trump and Blair's Gaza reset. Who rebuilds and who takes power? On September 29th, US President Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stood at the White House and unveiled a 20-point proposal to end Israel's war on Gaza. The plan called for a conditional ceasefire, a full exchange of hostages, the removal of Hamas from governing power, and the creation of a transitional technocratic body to run Gaza under international oversight, a board of peace. Crucially, the plan named Tony Blair as a central figure in that board, responsible for reconstruction, security coordination, and administrative oversight. The proposal was formed as a last chance: either accept this new order or face continued bombardment. When a board is imposed from without, not built from within, who truly rules? Can Palestinians accept a transition where their voices are sidelined? And given Tony Blair's history in the Middle East and Iraq, who wins and who is sacrificed? Let's break it down in today's Star Explains. Trump's framework demands that Hamas relinquish political and military control, that Israeli forces begin a phased withdrawal, and that Gaza's governance be handed over to a technocratic interim authority overseen by external actors. The plan insists Israel will not annex Gaza, yet it reserves for Israel the power to define and enforce security benchmarks. Reconstruction is to be tightly managed, and elections only promised in a future unspecified phase. From the outset, Blair's role is central. Multiple reports tie him to the authority, projecting him as the Western overseer expected to shepherd Gaza's transition. In public briefings, Trump and his allies have invoked Blair's credibility as a selling point for the scheme. Yet, what's conspicuously absent are clear guarantees of sovereignty, control over borders, or a binding timeline for return to self-rule. The plan gives oversight gifts to outsiders while leaving Palestinian input optional rather than essential. Blair's elevation to this role is not spontaneous. It is the culmination of decades of Western diplomacy and institutional influence in the region. Al Arabiya notes bluntly that Tony Blair's seat on post-war Gaza has been decades in the making. His tenure as quartet envoy, his foundations and consultancy networks, and his past statements all shape the corridors now seeking to orbit Gaza. But to many Palestinians and observers, Blair is not a neutral or benevolent actor. Al Jazeera calls him divisive and distrusted, citing the memory of his association with Western agendas and security doctrine over Palestinian rights. The Guardian's commentaries warn that his return brings forward the same strategic playbook: emphasis on technicians over justice and reconstruction over liberation. Time points to Blair's past belief in sequencing politics after economics, a model tried and widely criticized in the West Bank and in other conflict zones. Critics warn that Gaza may be the next site where that model is tested yet again. On October 3rd, Hamas announced that it accepts parts of Trump's proposal, but with large caveats. The group said it was ready to release all hostages, living and deceased, under the formula in Trump's plan, and to hand over Gaza's administration to a Palestinian technocratic body through Arab and Islamic support. At the same time, Hamas insisted that other parts, especially disarmament, require further negotiation. They declined to confirm that they would surrender their military power or that they would allow external forces to immediately control the enclave. According to Reuters, Hamas did not address the disarmament demand and said it would not disarm so long as Israeli occupation continues. One senior Hamas voice told mediators that disarmament before withdrawal is unrealistic. Analysts note that Hamas's statement is strategic. It accepts the humanitarian and governance frames while deflecting the security core. In effect, it enters the plan's architecture but refuses to hand over sovereignty lightly. Middle East Eye warns Trump's proposal is unlawful. Handing over governance to external authorities without Palestinian consent violates norms of self-determination and sovereignty. The plan's structure echoes colonial forms of trusteeship. The Guardian's in-depth reporting frames the model as undermining Palestinian institutions. One quoted analyst calls the plan's foundation a misunderstanding of occupied Palestine's political economy, assuming reform and reconstruction can succeed without political legitimacy. A Guardian op-ed calls the Trump-Blair vengeance a catastrophe waiting to happen, arguing that it is power management under the guise of humanitarianism, a project to sideline resistance and recast Gaza as a managerial zone. Time flagged potential conflicts of interest. Blair's overlapping roles make it unclear which Blair is serving, the diplomat, the consultant, or the Western overseer, and whether he can act independently of donor and Israeli pressure. Al Arabiya and Al Jazeera note that the plan insists on technocrats instead of representative governance. The danger, they warn, is that Gaza becomes a territory managed, not elected. If Hamas and Israel agree on the basics, Gaza could enter a hybrid transition. Technocratic rule under external oversight, reconstruction funded by donor states, security outsourced, and elections delayed indefinitely. Blair may act as a visible gatekeeper of legitimacy. Yet, if Israel or the Board of Peace undermines reconstruction, slows resource flow, or stalls elections, the interim authority may collapse into impotence. Dissenters could reemerge, resistance may adapt. The legitimacy gap might widen, not close. Should Blair's oversight tilt towards foreign interests, donors, Israeli security, Western actors, then Palestinians will see not rescue, but recolonization by another name. What happens when peace is handed down rather than earned? The Trump-Blair scheme offers a transition built by outsiders, not a return of power built by the people. Hamas has signaled cautious opening, accepting humanitarian frames while preserving its core power. That split reveals the flaw in the plan. You cannot build peace with only half of the parties. And Blair, once again, steps into the region not as mediator, but as governor in waiting. His track record bears scars. Iraq, Western interventions, promises of reform that ended in dependencies and civil fracture. So here's the final line. This isn't Gaza's reset. It might be its recover. And in that cover, Blair's intentions must, as technocracy, may rewrite who governs a land long starved of freedom.